Okay, great. All right, thank you so much to all of you for joining this online event, Community Filmmaking in Africa. I know that many people will be joining from across the African continent, actually. We've had registrations from Cameroon, Ghana, Malawi, Kenya, Sierra Leone, South Africa, to name but a few. We also have people joining us from North America and across the UK. Many joiners are filmmakers, journalists, creative professionals, or activists. It's such a pleasure to welcome all of you. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Jamsheda Ahmed Young. I'm a trustee of Purple Field Productions, which is a UK charity that believes in the power of film to make a difference. And this event is all about hearing the diverse voices of African filmmakers and experts in storytelling and community filmmaking. We have a wonderful panel for you. And without further ado, and although she needs no introduction, it's my honor to introduce our host for this event, Bola Mosuro. She is a global figure in broadcasting, and as many of you know, she championed African stories and voices on the BBC for more than 30 years. So let me hand you over to the one and only Bola Mosuro.
Thank you very much, Jamsheda, the one and only Jamsheda Young, who is a legend, I have to say. So thank you very much for that. And it's an honor to be here and to be with everyone this evening. Thanks for all of you for joining. And hopefully there'll be more people joining us as we go along. I'm pleased to be moderating this session about something that maybe we take for granted sometimes. Who is the people who are the voice for the voiceless, people who are using film in order to articulate the views that many within communities don't have, but don't actually know how to share. If they have an issue that's burning in their community, in their locality, and even their local government isn't listening to them, who do they turn to? And that's why community filmmaking is really playing a vital role. And hopefully we'll be hearing not just from our panelists, but from those of you who've joined as attendees. We really hope during the question and answer session, you will share your experience, you'll share the challenges that you may have, and any questions that are posed that come up from the panelists, what the panelists have to say, their submissions. So what we'll do, just to tell you about the format, we'll have a short introduction by each, a short presentation by each of the panelists, which may include a clip of one of their films. And then we'll have a short discussion of between 10 to 15 minutes, after which we'll have a question and answer session. So we just hope that you won't mind if we last for a bit longer than the 6 o'clock that you may have thought it was going to end, especially because we're now starting at 5:15. But just to give you, the attendees, more time to speak and more time to share with us and to pose your questions or comments that you may have. And especially if you have experience that you'd like to share of what it means to be a community filmmaker and what role you play or what you would like to see. So I'll just give the brief introduction and everybody will say their little piece, and then we'll have a short discussion, but hopefully we'll have more from the floor, so to speak, when you have your chance to also say what the burning issues are for you. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Aggie Nyagari-Salt is a Kenyan filmmaker based in Bristol in the south of England. She's directed, produced and edited both short and long form content for TV, broadcast TV and cinema. That's both in English and in Kiswahili. And Aggie directed Lisilo Julikana, The Unknown. Please correct me, Aggie, if I said that wrong. Which is a co-production which was with Purple Field Productions back in 2015. Patiel Mizeck is a filmmaker, a graphic designer, an editor and a training coordinator in Malawi with the independent production company, the Kasungu Film Collective. And Also joining us on the panel is Lape Olarinoye, who's a distinguished British Nigerian broadcaster with over a decade of on-screen experience. Her notable projects include in-depth reports and documentaries on child domestic labour across West Africa, mental health, entrepreneurship and migration. You may have seen her on Sky TV or on Arise News in Nigeria. Kevin Waldie is a British international and social development specialist, and he was the chairperson and executive director of the film production charity Purple Field Productions until just last year, 2023. And we were hoping for Hassanatu Sheriff, who is based in Sierra Leone, but unfortunately, we think it's because of some of the infrastructure problems with electricity. You may know that in Sierra Leone, they have very haphazard intermittent electricity supply. So unfortunately, it doesn't appear as if she'll be able to join us, but she has given a submission, which Jamshida will share with us a bit later, will share with us. And Hassanatu is a filmmaker, and she was the founder of the Empowering Women Foundation in Sierra Leone, which works towards realizing the full potential of girls and women through education and skill development. She's also a mentor in primary schools for Educate in Sierra Leone. So with that said, let me hand over to each of our panelists for a little presentation which they will give as to their own filmmaking journey. Aggie, if you don't mind starting, please, with the work that you're most proud of or the issue that's raised the most passion in you.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay, fine. So, I mean, I've got a lot of things I'm passionate about, but if I had to pick just one and something that's more connecting with Africa and, well, where I'm from, which is Kenya, at the moment, I feel like the top on the list would be addressing the corruption, just because it's so rife. And I'm actually in Kenya. I just came yesterday. I'm here on a filming project, and it's in your face as soon as you arrive. The corruption is everywhere. In fact, just driving today, you just see police collecting bribes and putting it in their pockets. So I made this series years and years ago now, but it's still one of my proudest projects just because of the circumstances under which I worked. And it's called Janjaruka, which is in Swahili translates to Get Smart. And it's about a woman who's a con artist, because con is also very rife. And she cons this girl, and the girl just tells her friends, and then they work out that there's a way they can try and get her back. And so it's a journey to try and get justice by themselves. Well, first they try going to the authorities, but it just ends up being one failed attempt after another because everyone is so corrupt and everybody has, they're going to the SBDA basically. And so it ends up with them having to come up with a plan to trap her themselves. And that's what I call Janjaruka. So they come out on top. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just like rushing through it because I know we all have 5 minutes or something. So I don't know if I've gone over my time.
No, that's fine. Would you like me to play the clip?
Yes. So before we play the clip, I just wanted to reiterate that so con is rife because of the corruption. So it kind of the two marry each other, and con is such a common thing. So that even when I was making this series, it was based off of something that had happened to me. And I just thought I have to make a film about it. So I actually pitched it as a film, but then in the end, I made it into a web series, which is available on YouTube. And when I was making the series, even the people I was working with, everyone I interacted with, people would come up to me and ask me, I've experienced this exact same thing. But they would say it like in hushed tones because it's an embarrassment to admit that you've fallen victim to the con artists. But actually, it's happening across the board, and it's more about how they groom you and the fact that they get away with it because of how corrupt the country is and the system is. And so, in the end, I feel like this series was good for sharing the platform, but also hopefully educating them in ways that you can get conned. And as part of the promotional marketing gimmick that we did for it was we got celebrities to share their con stories. And we posted that on YouTube as well. So I got some Kenyan celebrities, about 30 of them. And that made people now come out and talk about their own corn stories. And so it just created like a movement. So I'm very proud of that, just because of how much people connected with it, the community that I created from it, and the fact that people just thought it's good that someone's finally talking about this, because it's our everyday experience. Okay, now play the clip.
Hello, darling.
She's charming.
Hey, kijana.
So sweet, kind and generous.
Mimi naamini kwa ukarimu bado hujapotea. Ndio maana naenda nikisaidia kila ninavyoweza. Lakini unajua hii ni Nairobi, hakuna watu kama wewe huku.
And in a city full of crime and injustice, when there's no one to turn to,
Unadhani ni Rambo ama sijui ndio ile mnaita expert, eh?
it's nice to have someone like Mrs. Mwaniki.
Mimi ni yule.
Isn't it?
Mimi nilifeel kama ongea mama.
Or is it? Janjaruka coming soon.
That's it.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
That was gripping, Aggie. Thank you very much indeed. So from con artists and corruption, Patiel, please tell us what makes you tick and what brought you into the world of filmmaking in terms of your passion. I think you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. What makes me to venture into filmmaking? It was like, first, in our district, there was no one doing film industry here in Kasungu. So people were just coming from Blantyre and Lilongwe doing their filming here. So it was like something hard to me to see that in our community, we don't have anyone doing film production. And by then, I was a comedian. I was doing some comics here and there, here. So my videos were vital, going everywhere. People were loving it. So I said, oh, I think filmmaking is a big tool to teach someone. And I think more people can get things and know things through filmmaking. It's when I said, oh, what if I can find some people, some guys, and creating stories and teach our community about what is happening into our community. It's when I ventured into filmmaking, and I did some documentaries about like COVID-19, albinism, even some just for a minute, so talking about anything happening in our community so that others can learn through our films. So that makes me to venture into filmmaking. So I'm glad that things are doing as I was thinking, and there's more change, and people know more things through films. And for example, Jamsheda, you can play the clip of our documentary, one of it. Yeah.
Ana mbiri makamaka atsikana akanika skulu yawo chifukwa chonena kuti atenga mimba.
Amina is only 13 years old. During this period of school closure, she was married.
COVID-19 yali kudza kwambiri ineyo ndatikana azizanga ambaka kuti ifeyo pakhomo timaso azochita uzoti atikana ena amakwati wali achichepere makhala zinthu zovuta kuti mwina mwake munthu adzipange control chifukwa tisavula school tikamwambira school kuja amakhala kuti langiza aphunzitsi zinthu zambirimbiri ndopeza kuti timasoweka sophungu wina wake mpaka timapeza kuti timangopanga zomwe tikuganiza.
COVID-19 has contributed to these pregnancies. Ndikungopempha kuti ngati kuli mabungwe ati angathe kuthandiza athandize makamaka ana akazi inde athandize ana onse amuna koma makamaka akhale patsogolo ndi ana akazi.
Boma lifunika likhazikitse ndondomeko zabwino kuti anthu azitha kupita skulu ndi cholinga choti mavuto amene wawo asapitirire.
Ikadakonda boma likadatigwira manja ife anthu akuno kumudzi kuti ngati mmene kulili kulimbikitsana nawo.
But I would still want the government to consider reopening schools, because as we have said earlier on, that most of these teenage abortions have happened due to school closure, which was a result of COVID-19.
Wow, that was short but very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm so happy that through that clip you have seen here, more girls are back now in school. They leave their child at home, and it plays a big role. The awareness of that film, because people went out and screened the film into communities, different communities. Even it was also played on our TV stations here in Malawi, including the streaming from YouTube. People know that they can go back to school if they have got children. And I gained more experience through that COVID-19 time. It was so difficult to go somewhere and shoot a film, but mostly things goes well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patiel, and very powerful indeed. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll be hearing more about that, discussing a bit more in the discussion with you and the others. Lape, if I can turn to you now, because you've been usually in front of the camera. What made you decide to actually shoot your own film, and what subjects have you highlighted that have really meant a lot to you?
Thank you so much, Bola, and to the filmmakers that went ahead of me. Really powerful films there. Well, for me, as you rightly pointed out, a lot of my professional career was in front of the camera, doing a lot of on-the-field reporting. But actually, I've always had a passion for documentary storytelling and filmmaking, and the kind of non-fiction element of that, particularly in the continent of Africa. I'm originally from Nigeria, and just growing up, there were so many issues that I was faced with, or I saw that it didn't really settle with me, and I felt like there should be a closer eye on such issues, and should really be awareness should be raised around a lot of those issues. And the film that you're about to watch really spurred that interest, which led onto a lot more stories coming, or a lot more documentaries that I made, and a lot of it is human focused. So very similar to kind of the stuff that Patiel and Aggie have done. This film that you're about to watch is really about modern day, in my opinion, modern day slavery. That's what kind of spurred the interest. So many of us who come from Africa, particularly in West Africa, are very accustomed to having domestic help. A lot of them tend to be underage. A lot of them tend to be maltreated. A lot of them, it's not a contractual agreement. A lot of it is, wired in injustice, but it's normalized, and that was what really sparked the interest. It's a very normal and adapted culture into homes. Whether you're rich or poor, there is usually somebody in the house that's doing kind of all this work that, for me, was ironic, that coming from Africa, our history of the slave trade, it was almost like we were repeating that thing. It never sat well with me. And that was what led to me making this first documentary. And then, of course, following that, I widened my interest into looking at kind of the boys and the young boys, specifically in the northern part of Nigeria. Some of us are familiar with the term Al-Majiri and that kind of thing, and looking at kind of how the Al-Majiri schools are contributing to radicalization of young boys into kind of extreme terrorism and so on. So this is a first for me. It was the first of many to come after that. I hope you will enjoy it, but that's where my interests lie, in kind of that documentary filmmaking. And yeah, so you can play the clip. The International Labour Organization approximates that an estimated 15 million children under 14 work to earn a living in Nigeria. Why did you come and do this job?
Because my parents don't have power to pay my school fees.
In rural areas, they can be found performing hazardous work and using dangerous tools. They are often victims of rape, crime, forced labour and physical violence. What job do you want to do in Lagos?
I want to go and learn a trade.
Which kind of trade would you like to learn? Do you want to do domestic work?
Ma?
Do you want to do domestic work? So as you can see, her answers are being influenced. There's some people behind me here, relatives maybe, aunties and uncles, that are actually influencing her answer. She actually told me initially that she wanted to go to Lagos to work in a domestic household and be of help, like a lot of the girls that come from here. As you can see, it's really, really hush-hush. The situation's quite tense. A lot of them do want to go to Lagos to work because of the lifestyle that they see there, but they're doing this back at home. And you can tell that the parents are all in their head. So it's just a bit sad that she's not able to tell us what she truly thinks. Many people I spoke to have attributed this problem to poverty and a lack of education. Yeah, I just feel a bit shocked that she's actually 14 years old and she's sitting here doing this on a daily basis. Generally, domestic workers have low pay, work long hours, have no legal protection with unlawful contracts and minimal annual leave.
They benefit from their journey to Lagos for work because back in their houses they live on farms. They do not have electricity, clean water or even proper toilets to use. When these kids come to Lagos, it's like a dream to them. They get to watch TV. They even have air conditioning. Some of them have never even seen such before.
The way they treat them and the way they treat them, because they don't allow them seeing their family, they don't allow them to talk to their family. So that one is like a slave.
So I am embarking on this journey to see what is causing this problem in West Africa.
Wow, Lape, that was really, shocking for some, especially if not from Nigeria. But sadly, as you said, it's so commonplace, and not just around Nigeria, but around West Africa and even parts of the East as well. And I think what's also shocking is it's not just the rich who are doing it; it cuts across all levels. Thank you very much for that, and I know we will be addressing more of those issues in the discussion, because I think it's where one goes with this kind of activism and highlighting these that we really want to talk about the role that community filmmaking makes, which leads me swiftly on to Kevin, because Kevin, you through PFP have helped a number of organizations and individuals make the kind of films that are, making an impact. Can you talk a little bit about your role and what the films you've been, very involved in?
Yeah, I can do. What I wanted, yes, I could do. What I want to do is, if it's okay, to do a little presentation dealing with issues, the issue of power and filmmaking, which I think is relevant to all our filmmakers here. Is that okay with you?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Let me just share my screen quickly. I just press share.
I think so.
Share content.
Do you have the share button in the corner of your screen?
Here we are.
Okay.
So this. Okay, so this deals with issues of filmmaking and power. It's one of the things which I came from an international development background that has concerned me for a long time. Has always been of interest to me. Let me start off with the big point, and that is that humans are storytellers. We like to tell each other stories. And I think we can all accept that storytelling is a unique activity that in a way defines us as human beings. Why do we tell stories? It gives our lives a sense of focus and purpose. And I think storytelling is really important for it gives us a sense in an uncertain world. It makes simple life's complications. The way we draw upon storytelling as a device to make sense of the world in which we live. It helps us to communicate and connect with other people. We tell stories to our children to help them enter into the world. We tell stories to each other. We also tell stories to influence other people as well. There's an old phrase that says history is written by the winners, which I think suggests that there is a relationship between storytelling and who tells the narratives and the issue of power. Now, there are many forms of storytelling around the world, which all have their value and their contribution to human history. We have in Africa, of course, we have the great oral traditions of storytelling. In Europe, we have epic poems, we have folk tales, origin stories from all the way around the world. So oral tradition is a major part of storytelling. We sing songs and we play music. It's another device upon which we tell stories to each other. And in Europe and other literate places, we have plays as well. The modern age has brought a different form of storytelling to us through its technology. It's brought us radio that Bola and other colleagues are very into and an expert in. It brings film and of course television as well. But it seems to me film is particularly powerful and important as a sort of vehicle for telling stories. In fact, it brings sound and vision together. And I think this makes it a very potent vehicle for storytelling. And you can see this in the massive industries that we see in Holly, Bolly and Nollywood industries. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of industry tied up to filmmaking. Why? Because it is so powerful. It's nothing we can ignore. Now, the relationship between film in terms of doing good and doing bad, there's a lot of debate around this. So in a way, one thing I wanted to draw attention to is the fact that the power of film to shape and influence society has long been recognised, and often by powerful and influential people. They recognised very early on the significance that film could play in shaping the world around them. Both democratic and non-democratic countries, states have made use of film as propaganda devices. Some of the earlier documentaries and dramas were produced by Soviet Russia as a way to actually instill a sense of sort of commitment amongst the populace. So we've got these propaganda kind of films. There are Hollywood movies, but some would say, are these just about entertainment? Or are they also, do they also sell useful myths and dreams? In a way, there's an issue there. Is entertainment a way to distract people from the real issues that may be facing in society? Educational films and documentaries may claim truth and reality, but these too can often carry moral and ideological interests hidden within them as well. So just for one example, so you might think about films about HIV/AIDS in Africa, but if you look very closely at the kind of relationship they have to issues such as prophylaxis and disability, persons with disability and whether they have sex or not, abstinence, you often find there's moral issues running through these issues as well. So the world that we're living in now is rather different. It changed a great deal, certainly the last 10, 20 years of my life. So what is the effect of the spread of digital media technology? Aren't we all filmmakers now? Is this a good thing? Does it make everything more democratic? But I think the question we have to ask here, especially for community filmmakers, are we sure that everyone is benefiting? Or is this leading to an unhealthy fragmentation of reality, where what is good to me is maybe bad to you? Are we now living in the post-truth world? And does it really matter? Well, I think it does. Yes, it does. I think it matters more than ever that we take a critical gaze at our own work as filmmakers or people involved in film production, as well as the work of others. For filmmakers who want to make a positive difference, it's essential to ask fundamental questions about the films we make. And I think this takes us to the heart of the question of power and filmmaking. We should ask questions: who chose the story? Who wrote the story? Who funded the film? Who made the film? Who distributed the film? And so on. In other words, we always have to ask who is controlling the narrative. and also importantly, whose voices are not being heard and whose stories are not being told. And finally,
Kevin, forgive me for interrupting you there, but these are some of the elements I think we can now explore in the discussion so that we can have the discussion amongst you as the panelists and then also expand it to the attendees. So forgive me for interrupting your flow, but I actually think that I actually want to pick you up on that point, maybe, and expand this to our discussion, because maybe it's worth saying, and we'll just be chatting about this now with you as the four panelists. Maybe if I can ask you, Patiel, when you first started, was it that you were, when you said that, you know, filmmaking wasn't really, nobody was really making the films, nobody was commissioning anybody to do films for the community, you took it upon yourself, but was that a challenge for you to decide how you were going to fund it, or even what issue you were going to talk about? You know, who were you representing, for instance? You know, because Kevin has just raised some interesting points as well, because sometimes you may have the interest, you may have the passion, you may have the subject that you want to fight for, but you may not have the resources. Was that the case for you? And, you know, did it matter where you got the resources from? What challenges did you face?
First of all, my challenge was like, how can I edit the film if I have a camera? And the second thing was the camera itself, because by then, even the smartphone was not there. We are just seeing people, and by then, the one who can handle the camera, it was like an elder people. Here in Malawi, when you see someone is shooting a video, it would be a big man, not some youth. So I said, how can I venture into this production? And where can I get the camera? Lucky enough, by then, there was a certain woman who was once in UK, but she was a Malawian. And when she was here in Malawi, I met her, and she was telling me that I have a camera at my home, but it's a small one. This Sony using some mini disc, if you know it. I said, okay. So I was going to that woman and give myself a training using that small gadget. But I can say more thanks to Tim Bamba. One day I met Tim Bamba here in Malawi. He was doing his project of translating a certain movie from Kenya, I can say. So when I meet Tim Bamba there, I chat with him and we share stories. By then, more stories about film production. And he was saying actually he was more into audios, not video. He said, my wife is the one doing the videos. So I start chatting with Tim Bamba. By then, up to he go back to UK, we are still communicating. Lucky enough, there's some things that I was telling him that I'm in need of. So on his way, okay, when he was there, he bought those things for me and he gave them to Kevin. So when Kevin came in Malawi, I met him also to give me those things I was in need of. So it was like now I'm on another level of production. After chatting with Kevin, Kevin goes back to UK and he communicated me and the mastermind, Ricky Ogood. So the communication of me and Ricky Ogood, oh wow, it was something great. And he mentored me so very much, and I'm not that one from the first because of him. So I thank him personally. And I can say Now I have so many things that I'm using here right now as a professional, but it's property of PFP. So we.
And if I may say, Patiel, because and as Jamshid said, we're not just here to talk about, who perhaps, PFP may have funded. It's also to talk about the whole issue of, does it matter where you're getting your funding, or is it by any means necessary? Like when you were doing your film on child labor, I wonder whether some of those people may have distrusted you, not just because you were exposing them, but they were maybe, I wonder, were they even thinking, well, who's paying her then? Who's she doing this for? And I wonder if you've sometimes had to deal with that kind of challenge, or did you fund it yourself? Did you face opposition when you came with your camera and said you wanted to do this film?
For me, I mean, just filming in Africa, especially places like Nigeria, is a very big challenge. Access is a big issue. Luckily for me, because like I said, this was an ongoing thing whereby I had been almost studying and researching into this issue for so long, and I'd seen it all around me. I had seen it very much evident within my own household, family households. Everywhere you go, you'd see somebody, this underage kid in the house, is working like 17 hours a day, sleeps for about 4 hours. And I was always challenging. I think someone's got their
yeah, somebody's baby may be crying in the background.
Patiel, do you want to mute yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. So I for me, it was always constantly challenging what was in front of me. I had several kind of disagreements with people that I could directly get access to, but the access was all there for me in this case, because it was, like I said, it was a very normalized system. So what I did to build a bigger story around it was, how is this happening? How were young children getting into households? And it was almost like a channel, or it was like it was like a distribution channel, if you like. So it would start off with the parents who were typically poverty stricken. They tend to be farmers who no longer could afford to send their kids to school anymore, or couldn't accommodate their numerous children, working with them on farms and so on. They would get in touch with what are known as agents, and this agent served as a middleman, and this middleman would then get in touch with families that were in need of these children. And I knew one of those agents because she would always frequent a lot of places that I'd go to, family members' houses and so on and so forth. So for me, the problem was staring at me right in my face. And for years I had challenged it. But everybody sort of said, this is perfectly normal. It was almost like a transactional thing. These children are from poorer backgrounds. We're helping them by giving them a home, luxury, if you like, things that they would never have access to. And it wasn't all bad. There were some genuine people that were, giving these young children vocational skills, making sure that after a year of staying with them, they would go into some form of education. But on the whole, a lot of at the time, I think this was back in 2018, I did this, but on the whole, a lot of the issues that were being faced were children that were being abused, like I said in the documentary and so on. So for me, it was really the access. I got the access eventually. I had to build the trust. The young girl that was in that video, she didn't want to speak to me. It took about a year of convincing her, and her going back and forth. She lived in the southwestern part of Nigeria, so I had to do a lot of commuting. I had to do a lot of reassuring her family that, look, we're not trying to set you up or make you look bad. We just want to explore what your circumstances are that has led you into having no other choice but to follow this route. And then the agent, who's the lady that appears anonymously, she didn't see the wrong in what was going on. She was hard. She didn't want to appear on screen, and was really reluctant. Again, she was quite hostile at some times as well. At times she was, very reluctant, and why do you want to do this? But on the whole, it was self-funded, self-researched, and it was something that was, like I said, documentaries like this take years of building research, building knowledge, and widening your access to people.
And yet they're so necessary because they expose something that's just taken as commonplace and something that people just accept as the norm. And Aggie, that's something that you did, not necessarily in the film, also in the film you did about corruption, but an earlier film that you did, the one about the young girl with cerebral palsy, and exposing the community to realizing that, hold on a minute, don't treat this young child as if she has a curse. But there are things that people just take as commonplace, a bit like Lape was saying, everybody regards it as such, as normal, and nobody questions it. So what was the kind of reaction when you take this on board, in the same way that Patiel spoke about young child brides, young students being forced into marriage? What's the kind of reaction that the community gives you when you voice things that they may find uncomfortable?
Is that for me or Lape? Sorry.
For you, Aggie. For you, please.
All right. Is that in response to the cerebral palsy film or the corruption
yes
film?
And just in general, well, all of
In
them
general.
actually, because it's I think you're all touching on things that issues that people find uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, in response to the cerebral palsy film, that was something which was a learning curve even for me. Like I didn't know what cerebral palsy was. This is like, me being honest, confession time. I didn't know what cerebral palsy was until I got asked to be part of this project. And I was learning so much, and I realized the reason it's called Lisologilicana is because, or the unknown, is because it really isn't known. And so it was more about understanding that cerebral palsy can happen to anybody. Anybody can have a normal pregnancy, and at the process of giving birth, things can go wrong that can lead your child to have cerebral palsy. I didn't know that. So I think it was a very eye-opening, insightful project to be part of, but also everyone who ended up getting involved or watching it or interacting with us was also having the same reaction of, oh, even if there were people who didn't have any direct connection to cerebral palsy or didn't have any family or friend that had it. So it was a very educational, like kind of insightful project, but also for those who had family members or children with cerebral palsy, or just the idea that cerebral palsy or any disability is considered a curse, it's because of lack of education and just not understanding. And so it's one blanket explanation that's given that everybody accepts, because at least there's some explanation. So, and there's nothing to challenge us that explanation. So everybody took it on board because that's all they knew. And so when you come in and say, actually, that's not a curse, and because I guess because of African folktales and religion and how the two somehow intermarry, and people become superstitious, it becomes something that's feasible and easier to accept, even though a lot of people will be religious, but also be so superstitious. How the two work, I don't know. But it tended to be something which would grasp the attention a lot easier than to just look into why is it happening to someone who had a normal pregnancy and suddenly it's happened, And so to be able to lift the lid on the fact that it can happen to anyone, despite of your background, your economic circumstances, or anything, was a huge eye-opener. So on the whole, it was very positively received, that particular one. For the corruption one, I had people asking me about whether I was going to get in trouble. Am I not worried about the police shutting me down, or if someone powerful would try and, like, because to be fair with you, like if you're Kenyan, or if you're someone who knew how politics worked in Kenya, I kind of used the series to directly attack some people. So some of the names are playing on actual people that exist. And you can see I'm trying to say something about this particular person, which people found really daring and really bold. And even though it was fictitious characters, it was a story that was made up, and a lot of it I used a lot of humor, because I like to use humor to connect with my audiences. They still felt like, oh wow, that was a bit of a bold move there. So of course people did worry for a second, but on the whole, because of how much the community responded to it, and the audiences, even to this day, like getting really positive comments and responses, I feel like it was a good thing, and people connected with it because of how finally I'm giving a voice to something that nobody's talked about, and it's like become normal to not talk about it, and so they keep getting away with it. So until we do something about it, So.
Very brave of you. Very, very brave. And I wonder, Kevin, just to come back to you before we open up the floor to others, because I'm dying to hear about Tim and Ronit, especially with some of your audio productions, and others who I know were, you know, we have a lot of filmmakers amongst us. But Kevin, when you decided, especially with PFP and even now in other work that you do, when you decide who to fund, what criteria do you use? Because sometimes this is challenged on the ground and people say, oh yeah, well look, you're getting money from so and so because they're bound to fund this because it's a, I don't know, it's a the subject of the moment, or it's the subject that the West has a bee in their bonnet about, but we don't care about that as much at home. Do you ever, you know, have you ever faced that when deciding what projects to fund and who to give training to, for instance?
I think it's a good question. I think PFP is so small that it's had to. Sorry, the dog. Sorry. PFP is so small, I think it's had to take advantage of the money as and when it's presented itself, when it's been linked to a good idea, so a noble idea. So in a way, I think it's had to be tactical in the way it's maneuvered towards the different kinds of films it's carried out and supported, rather than being more strategic in terms of thinking through what are the priorities. So often a film will get funded because someone says there's a need for a film on cerebral palsy, or there's a need for a film on you know, impact of COVID on schoolgirls in Africa, or whatever. So in a way, it's responsive to expressions of demand coming from the local level, the community level, if you like. But I think the weakness is that from that is what stories are out there which we are unable to get funding for. Are there stories which are being missed out because of the lack of funding, or because they're too politically hot potatoes? For example, thinking about sort of African level community filmmaking, films on ethnicity, films on racism in Africa, films on homosexuality in Africa. Where are those films? Well, they're very difficult to do because a whole range of issues at community level and to do with politics as well. So by raising the issue about filmmakers, and the challenge to filmmakers is that, yes, everyone tries to do their best and makes contributions, but I still think we've got to look beyond that to say what films are not being made and are there important stories out there that we also need to work towards as well. So in a way, yeah, PFP has had to sort of respond as and when it can, but it's never had this resource space to take a more radical position to filmmaking, to say these are the priorities and let's find ways to actually address those kind of issues. Does that make sense?
It does, most definitely. And I think it's something that we maybe now can open up and discuss. It may be one of the issues. I know that we have people who probably have some burning questions, and I don't know if there are any hands raised, Beth, if there's anybody who's already posed a question. Thank you very much for all those contributions, by the way. Tim? Hi, Tim and Ronit.
Sorry. Hi. Sorry, just for turning my mic on, raising my hand up. Really enjoyed all of that. Thanks so much to everybody. Yeah, I guess I was just going to expand on your question, Kevin. I mean, so my name's Tim. I'm a sound designer and composer, and I've volunteered with PFP in the past for about 10 years or something. Been involved with things, and also been doing some training recently. And yeah, I've always wondered, as we've been part of those projects, about the issues that you've been talking about. It's, you know, PFP is a great organization. It's very small as well. And yeah, but you know, its partners, the international development community in general, obviously they all have certain particular interests, or worthy interests: disability, education, sanitation, health. But obviously they kind of direct the narrative in certain ways like that. And I've always just wondered what films would be made if we just gave people money. But of course we can't do that, because the international development community needs to work with governments in order to get funding and training through, which obviously, as you said, means avoiding certain issues. And there's a kind of, perhaps, yeah, silent censorship going on there. And so I guess to maybe more direct that more, to ask that more directly, I mean, specifically Aggie, I wonder, could PFP or another organisation ever have funded Jandaruka? And maybe the same to you, Lape, and if not, you know, how do you continue to make those films?
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
First of all, there's no government that would have funded Jandaruka, that's for sure. You can be sure of that. I think they would have changed it completely to make themselves look really good. So I think the only way I could have made it, that's why I made it, is because I funded it myself and I could take risks on the script and I could push it as far as I wanted to. And sometimes actors would be like, "Are you sure you want me to say this?" Yeah, that's what I want. As far as PFP, I mean, if they saw it as a tool to try and connect with their objectives, then yeah, I mean, it also depends on what PFP or any organization is trying to achieve. And if you have, like, from what I know from PFP or any organization, it's more about what it is you're trying to do to help the community. And if it helps the community, then yeah, if there's a way that I could sell it that would make sense to them, I'm sure they would have been on board, especially if they'd experienced what I experienced and what most of us experienced. Then they'd be like, okay, yeah, we need to do something that's powerful to connect with people and educate them. So I don't see why not. But the government, no.
Lape?
I think I would just echo everything that Aggie has said. The government definitely wouldn't have funded my film. I don't even think most of the local TV stations in Nigeria would have funded it, just because, like I said earlier, everybody was guilty of this crime. Or, you know, if you call it a crime or not, of this immorality, if you like. And so for that reason, they wouldn't have seen the awareness or the story element in that, which is why, just like Aggie, I did it myself. I could push the boundaries. I could get as much access as I wanted. I could control the narrative, and I could do the promotion myself to people that I know that would find this horrific, that this was going on. You know, unfortunately, it doesn't get as wide as you intend it to. There are always kind of challenges and barriers. And that's where someone, an organization like PFP could have come in, where you can scale it up and really push it to a wider audience that care about these kinds of moral issues. So just like Aggie said, if it was something that PFP was interested in and, you know, was fully behind and supported the cause, then there's no doubt that I would have kind of engaged and collaborated. But in terms of the environment I was in and the people that were involved in making it, or the, you know, the people that are exposed to that nature of that kind of story, no, it would have been a complete dead end if I didn't, you know, push it myself, if you like. So.
An interesting thing that you said, though, that maybe tying in with what Tim said, is the flip side, some would argue, is that he who pays the piper calls the tune. And what did you say, Tim? You said that funders direct the narrative. And in a way, you could sometimes be tied to the sexy issues because they're willing to open their coffers. Beth, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I do have a question, but I also just did want to say, if anybody has a question that they don't want to ask, you can put it in the chat and I'll send it on to Bola and she can read your question out. I don't think we've said that. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to introduce the issue of gender into the whole issue of access as well. And Kevin's points about, like, how do we, not just who tells stories, but how do we tell stories? And my experience as a filmmaker, I mean, even within, I've been an independent filmmaker and worked in the independent sector in Scotland for many years. I had a short spell at BBC Scotland where I was informed that there was no gender imbalance at BBC Scotland, because look at all of these women. And all of the women were supporting the men to tell the stories. All of the women were doing the production, doing the accounts, maybe doing the art department, maybe doing producing. But actually, in terms of writing and directing, I mean, it's so inspirational to hear from Lape and from Aggie, you know, because I think that it makes such a difference, like, who is telling the story and what perspective. And actually, as women, how we're photographed and how we're filmed, and whether we're photographed by other women or by men. And I think that when we're talking about community filmmaking in Africa, I think that is, I don't know, I guess that is my question, is that would you say that is a bigger issue or the same kind of issue in Africa as we experience here? Or is it more of an issue? Like, are there less women filmmakers in Africa? And that's something that I'm very interested in from a PFP perspective of addressing.
Lape or Aggie wants to take that.
I was just going to say that for me, you know, coming from Nigeria and making films in Nigeria, it's a very patriarchal society anyway. And so when a woman tries to penetrate any kind of environment that maybe it's not typically dominated by women, there is a lot of pushback. And for me, I think when I was telling this story and when I told more stories following this, there was a lot of shock. There was a lot of, are you sure you're safe? Are you sure you should be doing this? You know, and you get a lot of that when you kind of disrupt environments or kind of areas that you're not typically seen in. However, I would say as well, though, that the way in which the kind of society set up out there as well means that a lot of kind of the big stories or the obscure stories are typically told by men. A lot of the issues that people want to hear about in Nigeria are typically told by men. Having said that, there are a lot of female filmmakers in Nigeria, but they tend to be concentrated in kind of entertainment, Nollywood, you know, a lot more kind of soft storytelling as opposed to telling hard line stories, documentary filmmaking, and the areas that I really wanted to penetrate. And so for me, I was always usually the only girl in the room, or, you know, the only lady in the room that wanted to tell big stories. I mean, for example, there was a story that I pitched about kind of at the time it was looking at the terrorism from Boko Haram in the Zambisa forest, and you know, I had pitched and I had access because I had a friend in the Nigerian Navy who was willing to take me in there, and it just got dismissed by all the local TV stations. Like, no, we need a man in there. We need a man that can, if anything happened, this could, you know, there's that notion of you're a woman, you can't do it. And it's quite patronizing in the sense that they portray it as if it's coming from a place of protection. But actually it's almost like, just stay in your place. This is not what women do here. Do something lighter. Go and do entertainment. Go to the Grammys and do something like that. So typically, no, there's not a lot of women in the type of stories that I would like to tell. And that's what spurred me to kind of disrupt those fields. Especially for local women as well. I was obviously deemed as an international person. So kind of I was able to maneuver through a lot of the challenges and obstacles. But for the local ladies out there that wanted to tell stories, hardline stories, it was always kind of pushed away to do something easier and softer.
So you got a pass. Aggie, has it been the same for you? The same kind of experience that Lape had?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. It sounds like Lape and I have our paths in terms of, I've always been the one disrupting the norms. I've worked in a lot of male-dominated environments, and I've just stuck it out. Especially, I think one of the things is you feel like it's set up to be a man's world, and so when you try to penetrate, they try to scare you away. And I've been in like, I started off actually. One of the things people don't know about me when I first joined the film industry is I joined in as a grip. I used to be a grip. And for those who don't know what grip is it's the department where they carry and maneuver all the equipment, like cranes and dollies, and build them and take them apart. And I was the only female in the entire company. And it's because my mom really wanted to help me get in the industry, but she didn't know where to take me. So then she had a contact, and they took me on as an intern. And they were like, we won't last here 5 days. And I was there 9 months. And I think them saying that to me was like, I'll show you. And so I that being made to feel like just because I'm female, I can't do it, gave me that more like bravado of I'll show you I can. And so I ended up injecting myself in more such similar situations where I was surrounded by men and I was objectified, and there was like lots of sexual advances and things to try and scare me away. But I was like, no, I'm going to stand my ground because this is where I belong and I want to do this. And this is how I'm going to do it. And yeah, even with Janjaruka, like obviously that's a very daring, I think you would say, kind of story to tell, as opposed to the soft entertainment kind of storylines of like love stories or comedy. And I genuinely wanted to tell the story because it was personal to me and I was very passionate about it. It took me a long time to finally get it on screen, and because it was something that happened to me and I knew people who had the similar experience. I thought how can nobody be talking about this? Like somebody has to. So it had to be me. So yes, of course there will be people questioning and raising an eyebrow, but if you just keep going, then eventually they have no choice but to join you. That's what I found.
And well done to both of you for, I like the term that you use, disrupting. And another lady who is disrupting, but unfortunately we didn't have the pleasure of hearing from her directly, is Hassanatu Sheriff, who's in Sierra Leone. We do have, though, her compatriot, Justice Thoronka, who I believe also is in the film industry. Justice, are you there? Because I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit of some of the issues that have mattered to you and others in the community, and when we're talking about filmmaking in Sierra Leone and the community. Justice, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you all?
Hi. Fine. How are you?
I'm fine. Yes, I want to the line of Lape, saying, especially the question Beth asked about women in filmmaking. Well, for Sierra Leone, Africa as a whole, there has been a lot of pushback, when you think about how we tailor our society and how men dominate society in everything. But then things are changing these days. We have a very young industry we are building here in Sierra Leone, and we start to see women coming on board, wanting to do film, like likes of Hassanatu. She's doing great in her team, and we are also running film classes here, and we've seen a lot of women showing interest into wanting to do films, and so that is also something good. So for what we have been doing, actually, we are introduced to, just after the war, we started to look at the issues that led us to the war. And so we want to address these issues. And so how we want to do it is to use our art, to use filmmaking to address these issues. And so that is what we have been doing. And we have the issues of child marriage, teenage pregnancy, corruption, and so on and so forth. So when I first met PFP about 8 years ago, that was what I was introduced to, and I became so passionate about documentary filmmaking. I started making them documentaries. And then later on, I moved into the health sector, which I was inspired by my grandmom. She had diabetes, and we never knew she had diabetes. She died of it. And so we later realized a few months before that was when we all found out she had diabetes. And so that was when I said, okay, I think this is a problem and we need to shed light on this issue. And as I speak now, we don't even have a data for diabetes in Sierra Leone. So it is really challenging. So one of our biggest problems as a nation is health. And I think Michael can confirm that because he's been working in Sierra Leone for years now. So that is what we have been doing. And recently, I was able to do a report for DW, a 12-minute report on diabetes. And currently,
Deutsche Welle, do you mean when you say DW?
Yes. So currently, my company in Apex Multimedia, we're working on a narrative on diabetes. We want to use that as an educational tool in Sierra Leone. That is what we are doing here. And we also, like I said, we're also running film trainings, free of course. Yeah.
And I'm curious, where do you get your funding from? How do you fund it, rather?
Yeah, well, for the 12-minute documentary, I was part of a fellowship, the Deutsche Welle one. So they funded that one, and when we made the film, they buy the rights of the film, and so that was
Okay.
And for the ones we have been making, like we get funding from PFP, but it is challenging, especially with the narrative that we want to make. It is very challenging to get funds. Of course, in Sierra Leone, it is difficult because film is not a government thing here. They don't pay attention to that at all. So if you need to make a film, you have to look for funding out of Sierra Leone. And that is the only way you'll be able to make a film here.
And talking of filmmaking, thank you very much, General Mustafa, or Justice Tharonga. Thank you for that. I wonder if it's, Jamshed, if you don't mind, if we could play a little bit of talking about female filmmakers and then linking it to Sierra Leone. If we could play a little bit of Hassanatu's film, would that be possible, please?
Absolutely. And, as we've said, unfortunately, Hassanatu couldn't join us because she's having a lot of problems with the lack of power where she is in Makeni in Northern Province in Sierra Leone. So I'm going to play now a film that she made. She founded an organization called the Empowering Women Foundation, which is all about skills training and education for girls and women with a focus on safe motherhood. And the following film is something actually she did after training actually from Justice through his Apex Multimedia company. And it's a film that has been shot entirely on mobile phone. So let's take a look.
My name is Balkishadi Ekoroma. I'm 20 years old. I stay with my mom and siblings. I got pregnant at the age of 19. When my family members knew that I was pregnant, it was really not easy because it was like I was being a disappointment. I felt all sorts of things. I felt miserable. I would not be able to do anything about my life. But it was with those words, I need to do something and make my mommy proud because my mom is my first priority. I met my mom. I tried to explain to her and make her see reasons that this was never what I bargained for. So I pleaded for her forgiveness. I asked her to forgive me and give me another chance. I never felt that I'm a disappointment. Pregnancy can't stop me from studying. It can't stop me from doing what I want or what I want to achieve. I learned that this is not the ending of the world. This teenage pregnancy made me rethink my life. It made me rethink my career. It also made me rethink my education because I knew now that there is another life growing inside my womb that I have to be responsible for. So I need to stand very firm. Most importantly, I want to also advise my fellow girls that are pregnant or that are victims of teenage pregnancy but giving up on themselves. I want to tell them that there is hope. Pregnancy is not the ending of the world. You see, I do music. I'm not stressed life. Yes, pregnancy never stopped my career.
Well done to Hassanatu there. Very, very nice film. And that's just a clip of it. And all of you, I think all the films that we've seen show how powerful it is to spread a message and educate a society. And I think that's something that we really, are hearing from all of you is how you can galvanize and mobilize a community. I just wonder, Patiel, if I can come back to you, because I know you've done some work with people living with albinism. Did they give you the torch and tell you, we don't have a voice ourselves, we want you to articulate our issues? Or did you take it upon yourself to educate people and tell them, look, having albinism isn't something that you should regard as a curse, as some people do in some societies. I'm just wondering about when we're talking about using filmmaking in the community. Are you the torchbearer? Were you given the torch, or what is the situation, Patiel, in your case?
Yeah, the thing is, I have a friend with albinism. So most of the times when I'm with him, I see the way how he lives. So I said, yeah, these things must end. I can't let my friend to suffer because of this ignorant people have here in Malawi. So it's when I have some questions to him about how we feel being an albino, with a person with the albinism. So he shed more light on that. And after that, it's when we bring up the whole story and having the research from others, from police station, about how albinos are living here in Malawi. So after that research is when we come up with a story of understanding albinism.
Thank you very much. And it's a film I know I started watching. I want to see more. And I understand that you're going to do another long length film in the future. So that's certainly something that I'd love to see. I just wonder if there's anybody else, any of our other attendees who have a question or who have a comment who haven't had a chance to, or have been a bit shy of posing before we end the session. Is there anybody that would like to say anything that hasn't said anything yet? No? Victor, was that you? Were you about to say something? You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. One of the biggest things that, I would like, as filmmakers, being filmmakers, one of the issues I want to talk about, I think earlier on, I think that was Kelvin talked about, the government aspect of it, that, sometimes when you're telling stories, they influence in terms of how you bring forward that story itself. So my question is, like for you, Lape, you talked about that thing where there was somebody, even you're doing your own story. How do you remove yourself from that, from those aspects to tell your own story through that, like so that influence shouldn't be in your story? Because at the end of the day, if they influence your story, you're not going to bring it forward the way you want it to be, and the story itself cannot be told properly from the perspective of that maybe in an individual whom you are interviewing, as well as even the story you're talking about.
Thank you for your question, Victor. I think for me, a lot of the times it was kind of disassociating myself from the story, like you kind of alluded to, and also asking other people that had no knowledge of this. How do you feel about it? I had a lot of my friends come from the UK on holiday with me to Nigeria, and when they would ask me questions around it, then I knew that, okay, this is a story and this is something that is not just concerning to me, and I'm not just being biased in what I believe, but actually this is something that sparks interest with people outside of this environment. And I would go to places like neighboring Ghana, Ivory Coast, and I would see the same trend. But every time an outsider, even if you're originally from this region, but if you'd come from abroad and seen that was happening, you would always question yourself and challenge yourself. And should this be happening? Is this meant to be continue? Is this a moral thing? And like I said, it was something that I was developing the idea for many years. So it was an ongoing kind of discussion with myself and with others, and the cycle was the people who lived in that environment and grew up seeing this were very much accustomed to it. However, people that were from different environments and maybe further removed from the story didn't see it as normal. So it was about juxtaposing those things together. But I also wanted to make sure that I was telling the story properly, because I had spoken to older generations of people who said, look, it has certainly gotten out of hand. The premise of this them having somebody in your house as to help domestically is meant to be transactional. Like I said earlier, it's usually meant to be a distant relative that needs help with education or vocation and that kind of thing, and they come into your household. You might be more privileged, and that was the premise of it. But it has slowly become commercialized. It has become it turned into a commodity, and there was a lot of sinister things happening along that way, and that had become the new kind of basis of this phenomenon of underage, house helps in your house. And so for me, it was kind of researching around all of those stories, trying to remove my own opinion and beliefs, and getting information from people that don't normally see this. So that's how I kind of was able to place everything together and say, look, this is a story worth telling. And from that, it just opened another can of worms into other types of modern day slavery acts that were happening within our communities that was becoming normalized. And for me, that was worrying based off of our history.
Thank you very much, Lape Olarinoye. Thank you very much to also Aggie Nyagari, also to Kevin Waldie, and also to Patiel Mizeck. Thank you very much for all your contributions. And also we did have a contribution also from Hassanatu Sheriff, and to all of you who participated, and also listened patiently. We're sorry we ran over, and I know we could talk for some more time, but just because of time and so that we don't keep you forever, I'll hand back to Jamshida. But thank you very, very much for a lovely webinar and lovely session, lovely discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This brings us to the end of our event. So once again, thank you very much to you all for joining. Thank you to the amazing Bola and to our brilliant panel. Thank you all for your excellent questions and comments. And it's been such a powerful, important and fascinating discussion. We will be in touch to ask for some feedback, and if you'd like to continue the conversation, please send us an email or message us on social media. Do follow us on social media if you'd like to. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.